Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Modern Church Leader. I am here with the founder, co-founder of Pulpit AI, Michael Whittle. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good to see you.
I wish it was Pulpit AI. It's pulpitai.com, but that's because Pulpit AI is like when we last heard they wanted multiple six figures for that
$1
domain,
zillion.
which is crazy. Yeah.
That's all right. We're just gonna speak it into existence.
That's right.
And one day you're gonna have that thing.
Yeah. The world of the generous gets larger and larger if you own that domain.
Let's go. Let's go. So it's pulpitai.com.
Yeah.
That's still pretty good too, though. I mean, you got like AI. Have you looked at pulpit.com?
Yeah, and it's like
they want
even
$1 zillion
more expensive.
Well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good domain.
Yeah, because in fact, everything around Pulpit is pretty crazy, pretty high. So we've got 5 or 6 of them that are kind of around that same.
It's kind of an old world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of an old school type of word, but it's short. And yeah, if you could get the .com or the .ai, that would be killer.
I know. Trying someday.
Yeah, it'll all happen. So tell us about you and Pulpit and give us some of the backstory. I mean, we're talking about AI, so for the folks that are tuning in, right? Like Pulpit is in the universe of AI for churches, and you've been at this for a while. So yeah, give us the quick story.
Yeah. Gosh. So, I mean, long story short, I came up in kind of the advertising technology world. So was sort of building the last probably 10 or 12 years, kind of coupling together more traditional forms of advertising. So like out of home, think like taxi tops, bus shelters, billboards, that kind of thing. And then layering like super old school media, but then layering pieces of technology around them, right? So that's kind of the world that I've been in predominantly for the last 10 or 12 years, but I've also been building a church. So I planted a church with one of my best friends, Jake, who's also my co-founder in Pulpit AI, and have kind of just been doing those 2 tracks, kind of ministry and, trying to build companies and stuff. And we were building something totally different. We were building like a faith-based podcast network, kind of like the Barstool Sports for Christianity. It was a bit of an experiment that we were running just with some friends of ours. And the way the Pulpit AI kind of came into existence was we were producing like, it was like 10 or 12 podcast episodes a week. And most of them were like pretty dense theologically, and we just needed help. Like if we upload an episode, how can we write things like summaries and show notes and blog posts and all that kind of stuff? And we couldn't find any of these tools that could handle that level of like theological nuance. And then randomly through a friend came across a really smart guy who was building kind of a version of like a content repurposer, but was using about 500,000 hours of podcast listener data from like really long form podcasts to do it. And so we started playing around with like uploading our podcast to that, and then just kind of on a lark uploaded a sermon. And I was sitting next to the girl in our church she's like our youth director, comms director, social media director, all the above.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, would this save a lot of your time if you could turn the sermon into all these different assets? And she was like, that would literally be, 10 to 15 hours of my week that this would immediately solve. And so hit up a friend who's a developer, and I said, hey, let's connect together a few APIs. Let's build a very basic MVP around this. My thought was like 25 of my friends would use it, honestly. And it was taking so long to build this first version that I just got impatient one Friday afternoon, and I went and bought a Webflow landing page template, literally built a landing page, used AI to create our logo, right? Our Pulpit AI logo.
Wait, and is it still?
No, it's all changed, but I can send you what the first one was. Yeah. Because legit, I was like, my mind was like, like some of my friends may use this, and then I'll figure out what to do next. It was this like fun little side project.
Yeah.
So put up the landing page, and then went on Twitter and was like, hey, we're launching this thing in 30 days. Let me know if you want to test it. It's called Pulpit AI. And I hit send, and then I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and the tweet had just gone like crazy viral. on Twitter, and like thousands and thousands and thousands of people like messaging me, reaching out to me, all of it.
Really?
And yeah, it was insane. It was
I don't,
absolutely
that's the
insane.
first time I've heard that. So
Yeah.
fascinating. So you just hit it up. And I know you have millions of followers, so this makes total sense that, you know,
Yeah, totally.
So
No, what's funny is I don't have, I mean, I guess now it's funny because I'm like one of the guys on Twitter talking about AI in the church world. But then it was like my tweets were like about the Cowboys and memes and like nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I wasn't like a Twitter guy.
right.
But what happened was this really large blogger who's very anti-AI saw the tweet, thought that it was going to write sermons for you, and retweeted it and basically legitimately said, "This is the doctrine of demons" on it. And that's what set it off. And so the first few hours were people like telling me that this was demonic and I was doing the devil's work. But
All
then like
PR is
pastor,
good PR.
exactly. And there's been like one other time in my career where like some like random PR has happened at a product launch. And so I was like that Saturday, like sitting in the Trader Joe's parking lot, supposed to be grocery shopping, just like doubling down on, you know, on all of it. And then all of a sudden some pastor was like, wait a minute, I don't think this writes sermons for you. I think it just helps you create content based on your sermons.
Right.
So then that big account went back and was like, oh, I'm sorry. I should have read this better. This isn't what this does. And there you go. It was like by that Monday, we had like 1,500 people on a waiting list to use the product, and had like all these news publications reaching out to us. And so that was on a Friday, Saturday. And then that Monday, I was like, okay, we gotta really do this.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was how it started.
You're like, my landing page worked. Landing page and tweet. What's your take on like AI in the church right now? Right? Like AI is everywhere, and it's, you know, like you probably read the same thing like over the last couple of days, like Apple and Google are potentially doing something together, and you know, like AI is just everything you read about. I saw something the other day, like number of times AI was mentioned on like earnings calls compared to like blockchain or metaverse or VR or any of these other like, you know, hot topics or buzz terms. Like AI is just everything. It's everywhere. My kids know about it. Like they want to write papers using AI. I'm like, no, you have to actually write your own papers. But you know, it's buzzing around the church, and that tweet is that's common, right? I think that like AI doing things and pastors, people in the church, like not understanding it and kind of going, what's going on? So yeah, what's your take from where you've been sitting over the last few months?
It's crazy to see the really wide variety of like what people think, you know, pastors, church leaders, and all of that. I think there's like two tracks to it. I think there's like, from a pastoral perspective, it's like it's not something that can be ignored, because a pastor should have a theology and a philosophy around it, because our church members are like using it. And they're using it in ways that are like, what's the craziest thing you can imagine them interacting with AI? And that's how some of them are already using it. So it's like, I think every church is going to have to develop a philosophy and most importantly, like a theology around it. Right. But I think in terms of like how churches are using it, I mean, I don't think we have a choice but to be on the field. And we don't have a choice but to say, okay, how do we embrace this early? And how do we start building products now that may grow and pivot and all that kind of stuff, but to not be tinkering with this kind of stuff and figuring out ways for it to help solve problems for the church, to me, would be just like a massive missed opportunity. Especially because like so much of AI is trained on data, and that data can have different philosophies and different perspectives. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, there is like a whole part of the church that's the more theological academia type side that is really picking apart all the nuances of it. I find that right now, most pastors aren't doing that. They're getting to this is how I think about it, this is how I use it, pretty quickly. And then the real question is like, how do I do it to just make my job easier? How do I do it to make my staff's job easier and all that kind of stuff? So I think we have no choice, like a mandate to like kind of go and say, how do we build products to help serve the church? So
Yeah.
I think it's got to be embraced.
It is interesting to think about it that way, right? Like a few weeks back, Google launches Gemini, like their update or something like that. And then there was all that like crazy news around like people were like it was
erasing whole pieces of history.
or it was
right?
you would ask it certain questions and it would just respond with just incorrect information. Like it was trying to be something, like it was influenced somehow.
It was, yeah.
And so the results that it was spitting out were just factually incorrect, right? And it's interesting to think about AI in the church with like biblical truth and theology and all this kind of stuff, and like what you're using and how that could spit something back to you. And if you don't like really know your Bible, or like it could spit something back that you take as total fact, total truth. I mean, I guess that can happen on the internet too, but AI is kind of going to get woven into a lot of things. And so I guess it depends on how it's been trained, right? And what source you're going to.
Yeah. And like you said, exactly what you're bouncing it off against, what you're, if you're getting some kind of feedback from AI or some like what the questions you're asking it, what you're asking it to do, like a lot of the pastors that I've talked to who are using AI in their sermon prep, they're not using it for like biblical exegesis. They're using it for like, help me come up with a practical application, or, hey, these are my points. Help me make them be alliterated so they make more, so they're more memorable, right? Like, that's the way I see a lot of people using AI now from a sermon perspective. But yeah, it's certainly not going to like properly exegete scripture for you. Although, like ChatGPT doesn't do a bad job, to be honest with you. Like it's pretty good at being able to, even in some more like nuanced theological ideas, it does a good job of parsing that out.
Right. And
from what I've seen,
Yeah. And one day, it'll be sitting on, I mean, I'm sure it's sitting on this already, but I'm sure you'll be able to say, okay, here's the Chat GPT or the GPT that's sitting on like the, Baptist church, like the Southern Baptist theology or the method, like, right. It'll get into that universe one day where it's like, okay, I can just use this one because I'm, United Methodist and this is my thing, or I'm, AG, this is my thing. Like you just kind of use the one that's tailored to your universe a little bit.
Yeah. And I know that there's, we've chatted just because of the early visibility we got through kind of all this stuff. We've had a lot of like denominations reach out to us. So like a lot of the main denominations we've had conversations with, and I know each of them are asking those questions also, right? Like how does the UMC create their version of like, hey, this is the LLM that is has our stamp of approval on it, so there's certainly the challenge there is that's a really, really expensive endeavor,
right?
Like a really expensive endeavor. So I think it's going to take a lot of firepower to be able to do that and do it well. But people will do it for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm.
It's going to happen. No doubt.
Happen. Yeah, 100%.
And how amazing would that be for a pastor to be able to interact with it and upload some sermon notes or thoughts and have it be able to tell you like, hey, you're falling maybe out of the lines of what this denomination would say about XYZ. Like there's actually something pretty cool about that to me. Anyway.
Yeah. It's an aid in that sense. Yeah. I mean, even with what you're doing at Pulpit AI, like if a pastor was using it and they put in, 50 years of sermons, right? Like now all of a sudden it's almost like their own little LLM, like kind of micro LLM, or could be, right? That's based just on their material, right?
Yeah.
Or it's somehow tailored to their material.
That's 100%. And I think that's a lot of the questions we're asking is, a pastor creates so much content over the course of their life in the form of a sermon. And like what could be unlocked if they could learn from the entirety of the archive of every sermon that they've ever preached, and what could it tell them about the kind of illustrations that they use and the scriptures that they're more prone to preach from, and maybe what are some of their blind spots and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's pretty powerful what what will be able to be done,
Right.
and the problems that'll be able to be solved for sure.
Go
100%.
get like Chris Hodges or TD Jakes or Joel Osteen, or I don't know, anybody that's been around for a long time and has like probably millions of sermons, right, or talks of some sort, pump it in there, and now they have their thing. And then even the like church, members or churchgoers could be like chatting with this person. It'd be kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So tell us, what's Pulpit doing today? What's the product? What what kind of things are you doing, and where are you headed with it?
Yeah. So today we are, and we've really have been, we're in beta right now.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to, and thankfully have been around a lot of really smart people who have built, yourself included, who have been building stuff for the church space for a long time. And so we've really been wanting to go, okay, what's the actual problem we're trying to solve? Like, what do people actually need? I think a lot of times an entrepreneur can just go like, this is the problem and this is the solution. And so we're going to just do it, only to find out, oh, that actually wasn't the real problem that people are having. So we're very much in like a discovery phase still, just talking to a lot of users. But right now you upload the audio or video of your sermon, and it repurposes that into a variety of different pieces of material and content. So that's everything from like marketing material, like emails, to the church, social media posts, blog posts, tweet threads. We have a lot of pastors who are even going in there and asking it to pick a piece out of their sermon that would be great for like a reel, right? It'll deliver you quotes, but things like devotionals, discussion questions, some of that really basic content repurposed around churches that oftentimes they would pull from other places, or a volunteer would have to come up with from scratch.
Right.
So that's what it currently is.
So you put in your file, and then it's going to spit back out like, here's your sermon notes, or here's your discussion questions for small groups, or here's here's a handful of tweets that you can use. There's the whole transcript of
here's the transcript. Yeah. And then we have a prompting feature in there as well that can allow you to prompt whatever you want into getting something back from your sermon. So it's been really cool to see how people have been using that, and the information that they've been getting in different ways that I had a pastor from Canada reach out to me last week and said, hey man, what would be a good prompt to get this sermon to turn this sermon into an outline for a book? And so we was just going back and forth on text, and like we're coming up with ideas, and he's putting them in our little chat feature. And so that's kind of like the more playground type part of the product right now, which we're having fun with and learning a lot from. Yeah.
What's been the most surprising from being in beta and getting cut? Because you have churches, like pastors, using it. So like, I don't know, what's been the most interesting or surprising thing you've seen people doing with it?
It's been cool to see how people have been able to unlock, like pastors who have been wanting to provide additional content and resources for their church, finally like be able to do that, and then just seeing how they're implementing it, right? So, whether that's like, hey, immediately after church by 5 p.m. that night, the church is getting an email with discussion questions and devotionals. It's like a pastor legitimately being able to say like, I've been wanting to get this stuff to my congregation. I just haven't had the time or been able to figure out, how to do it.
Right.
I don't know if that's shocking or if it's just really cool to see. Like, oh wow, you've been pastoring this church of 100 people in Louisiana for 25 years, and you're now telling me that in 20 minutes you can get this additional value-added resource to your church, just by uploading your audio. I think probably the biggest shock that I've seen is who's actually using it. I think when we launched the product initially, we thought that it would be predominantly like social media managers at churches, people who run communications teams, and there is some of that. But like 7 out of 10 of our users are lead pastors.
Wow.
And they're looking at this as a resource, a content development resource for them. And they're viewing it as an additional way to have a signal to their congregation directly.
Right.
So that's been like really cool to see, and just kind of talk with them about what desires they've always had.
Right.
like what's another lane, what's another way for them to speak to their congregation throughout the week,
Right,
which is honestly, that's our big passion, right? Is like, I think we live in a world where the local church pastor's voice needs to be more elevated than it ever has been before. You know, as someone who's like a pastor myself, like the amount of undoing I've had to do from people in our church following this Christian influencer or this TikToker or whatever,
Yeah.
you know? So I think now just giving the pastor of maybe a smaller to medium-sized church without a big content team the chance to like provide more stuff to their actual congregation to me is like a really cool thing to see. And that's ultimately what we want to like really help pastors do.
It's always been one of those things, or for years, right? Probably for the last 10 years plus, with like the internet and social media and blogging and newsletters and all the places you could be. It's like, you know, there's the whole universe that we've lived in, you, me, people like us that live in like the digital space. We're like, man, a pastor spends 5, 10, 20 hours a week preparing a sermon, and they get up there and they preach for, you know, 30, 40, 60 minutes. And that's so much prep and so much content that then in a lot of cases it like dies right there.
It just died.
Like
Yeah.
you fed your congregation and they're going away having, you know, hopefully you know, been encouraged, inspired, all the things, right? But then kind of Sunday's over, weekend's over, you're into Tuesday and it's gone, right? Like and it's like redo. And but man, the amount of like material you could be like micro content that could be produced, like a blog, a newsletter, discussion questions, stuff for social media, short video clips, devotional content that you could be spitting them 7 days a week in short format from that sermon. Like you could repurpose it in so many ways, but that takes a whole nother like effort, right? Like it's a whole nother set of work to do that. And like most pastors, that's not, is like not built in, right? They don't know what to do. So like a tool like you've built kind of helps them get part of the way there, right? Like, so it's like enabling them to take their sermon and like let it last longer, which I think is like super cool.
Yeah. And have fun and be creative in the ways that they're doing that, you know, and like what that looks like. I think especially today where like, I think congregations are getting even more localized. Right. And so it's like, what is like, just like you said, like devotional content throughout the week, like, are there amazing resources out there that have been written by a company or an author that are super helpful? 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also like a local church pastor being able to go, no, I want my church to collectively be studying the same thing or learning the same thing or reflecting and praying the same prayers, right? Like that's such a powerful thing. And so I think like to see how pastors have been using our tool to figure that out has been really amazing. And it just seems to be the core, it seems to be the sentiment across the church right now, which is how does the pastor have a stronger signal to their people?
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. I mean, someone pops in their sermon, they get out, I don't know, the short newsletter, the sermon notes, the discussion questions, even those 3 pieces. Like they could get out a blog post, a newsletter, the sermon notes, the discussion questions, and the, I don't know, like
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, just those 4 pieces of content. And then somebody puts them in their places. I mean, all of a sudden you kind of take your sermon and multiply it by, you know, 4 or 5 times you can use it the whole week, right? Like
exactly.
It probably took you what, 10 minutes to pull that off?
Yeah. A super short amount
which
of
is
time.
pretty cool.
The other thing I will say, we're actually seeing now that we're, you know, like we're fully mobile responsive, so you can use the tool on your iPhone or your iPad. We're having pastors upload, basically they're practicing their sermon on a Thursday, you know?
Yeah.
So like I preach it into my iPhone, I take the file, I upload it to Pulpit AI, and then I just ask it questions.
Right.
You know, and I see what comes back. So it's like, it's cool to see how pastors are like using it to like help them kind of parse some thinking and so that's been pretty cool too, to see just like the iterations of how some of these people are using it. It's really fun.
Yeah. It's like a sermon prep team.
Exactly.
Like you can go back and forth with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like where are you headed with it? Like what's kind of on the short horizon with like what you're hearing, feedback you're getting, what you think is gonna be useful for pastors?
Yeah. So I think the big question we've been asking, obviously there is content repurposing, which we think is awesome, right? And there's a lot of people who are hacking this together themselves with things like ChatGPT and these different tools, right? Like there's a lot of great tools out there, but for us, what we really think is like, okay, first of all, like me and Jake and kind of our team, like we've all been pastors, right? So we've all like, we know the problems. And so for us, it's like, okay, how are we continuing to fine tune this particular solution for churches and pastors specifically, right? From a content repurposing perspective, right? So that we just want to continue to get better and better at.
You're not trying to like, you can't be generic. You have to be very, very purpose built for it to be useful for the things 100%. That like pastors want.
Totally. So there's that. We're obviously going to be launching a video product, right? So how can I upload my video and not just get text content back, but everything from shorts to kind of 8 to 12 minute specific clips, and ours, we're really focused on modeling, not necessarily for like virality, but for like what is the point that the pastor is trying to get across, right? So that's one thing we have found is like pastors actually really do care how their words are presented. So yeah, we've got like a video product. We're working on a product that will allow you to upload a PDF or a manuscript before you preach it, so you can upload that on a Friday, Saturday. And so those are some of the more immediate things. The big question we're asking is like, what are some of the big things that AI can unlock for pastors that have never existed before? So we're really thinking about ourselves like ultimately as like the Logos, but for after you preach. So what is now unlocked if you can upload every sermon that you've ever preached and every sermon you ever will preach? What type of learning can you get from that? What type of data? How can that inform future sermons? How can you create content based upon not just one sermon, but chunks and buckets of sermons? So for us, that's what we're really excited about is like if a pastor, so not just a one-to-one, but I'm going to upload, the last 10 years of sermon audio.
All my stuff.
All my stuff. And it can tell me, everything content wise, but also like, what's my average words per minute? What's the average length of my sermon? What's the sentiment of my sermon? Am I coming across really intense? All the way down to, do I lean more practical application or do I lean more, pastoral and exegetical? So those are the questions we're asking. And we're really committed to just building what our users want at the end of the day though. So I spend half my time talking to them and saying, hey, would this be helpful? Would that be helpful? What if we tried this? What if we tried that?
Dude, so sermon stats? Like,
oh yeah,
that would be killer.
I'm gonna say, it's like Strava for pastors, you know? Yeah. What can you learn from everything that you upload?
That you put out there. Yeah. No, I think that's super. That would be super. At minimum, it would be super interesting for pastors to see it. What they did with it or how it affected or helped or whatever, like, hard to say, but it's good. It's like feedback that that they don't get, and
the beautiful thing about building in AI is like tinkering is not hard, know, and even when we found that with Pulpit AI, it's like, dude, you spin up a little MVP of a feature or a little, version 1 of something and just see that's really how we're thinking about this because it's so much of it is open source and it's just what you do with what you're building around, for what use case. So
then it becomes a training tool, right? With like sermon stats and that kind of stuff. Now it's kind of a training tool.
Teaching teams. What do you, if you're a church with multiple campuses, what does that look like? How do you, all of that kind of stuff. And then, essentially for preachers or teachers of any kind. So not just a senior pastor, but what tools do kids pastors need and young adult pastors and youth pastors and Bible college professors. Like basically our goal is serve the church by reaching the people that communicate in the church, and building a tool for them.
Yeah.
So,
dude, I love it, man. Pulpitai.com.
Pulpitai.com.
Thank you. You'll get the .ai someday.
Someday. Someday.
Where's the best place? I mean, obviously the website, pulpitai.com, but Instagram, like where can folks go to kind of learn more?
Yeah, we're actually pulpit.ai on Instagram, funny enough.
Nice.
We're Pulpit AI on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. It's pretty much all I talk about, on there. So I'm at Michael Whittle. And we're same thing, Pulpit AI on YouTube. We're kind of early stages of just creating a bunch of helpful content for pastors and church leaders.
And it's kind of public beta. So, right, people can
public
go to
beta.
The site. They can sign up for it. They can check it out. What do you got? Like low hundreds of churches using it today, or pastors using it today?
Yeah, we've had about like over 1,500 pastors that have used it. We've got close to 300 people paying to use it every month.
Right.
And yeah, that's just been all strictly from word of mouth.
Right.
Us having some fun online. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
love it, man.
Try it out. If you sign up, you'll get an email specifically from me pretty quickly. And we're just looking for feedback. We want to build what people really want and solve problems that they're really trying to solve. So that's really what we've been obsessed with and are continued to be really obsessed with. So go
to pulpitai.com, sign up, give Mike and team feedback on its usefulness or not.
Absolutely.
And what you want it to do, man. Give some feedback into the product and see if they can build something awesome.
100%.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for jumping on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll circle back in, I don't know, 12 months and we'll see where you guys are at and what the
if we own Pulpit.ai, by then, it's worked.
And dude, 12 months from now, I mean, that's like 20 years in AI kind of universe. It's crazy. So who knows what'll be happening in 12 months. So we'll circle back. Guys, thanks for listening. Definitely spread the word about Pulpit AI and share this episode online and help give them some feedback. So thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. See ya.